Thanks, Ben. Appreciate that. And hopefully I'll do this one in English.
That's I think you're easier.
Yeah. My Chinese is very bad. Simon tries to teach me it, but
Yeah, we're good.
it's a failure. So I want to talk about CRM today, and it's an interesting topic. And when I was thinking about how to do this, and probably we have a whole mix of people. Some of you were probably not even born when this stuff started, but and some of you can probably relate to some of the things I'll talk about. But my point is that it is everywhere, and essentially what I'll do, I think, is take you through a bit of a history, take you back to the dark ages in the 70s and 80s. We'll talk about the idea of CRM, which I guess you've probably heard in other seminars, why it's important and how it's changing. We'll go through my background, or a large part of my career has been in the sales process, so I know it from the old days when it was very different, and I'll go through and talk about that and how CRM fits into that from that perspective and how it's changed over the last few years, and then I'll babble a little bit speculating about where it goes from here, because nobody really knows, but the reality is that there's huge opportunity there. Ben has talked a little bit about Dynamics, and I guess some of you would have seen that Dynamics is a great platform to go forward with it, because I think it gives the user and the developers a whole bunch of different ways of going outside and doing different things with it. So we'll jump right into it. So from a definition standpoint, it really refers to managing the relationship between a vendor and somebody that's consuming a product, whether you're buying a service or a product. So let me ask you a question. How many of you bought a car in the last 5 years? How many of you can remember the name of the salesperson that sold it to you? Just a couple. Since you bought the car, has the salesperson ever been in touch with you to ask how it's going, how you like the car? One or two of you have. It's fewer and fewer. But the point there is that is an attempt. When a salesperson comes back to you afterwards and asks you about how your satisfaction with the product or service, they're trying to do CRM. And in the old days, I remember when I was thinking about this, one of the first books I read about in CRM was around a car salesman who, I guess he would have worked in the 70s and early 80s. He kept a book, and that would be, let me just jump into this. He kept a book, a Rolodex it was called, of business cards, and he would get the person's name, their personal a little bit of their personal information. He'd send them notes and cards for their birthday and all kinds of just staying in touch, which is essentially what CRM is trying to do, trying to maintain a relationship. The challenge for any business really is, how do you grow? If you're not growing, you're going to stay static. And so the process would be engaging and trying to personalize the process, trying to develop a relationship with the individuals, collecting data. Again, that's Ben had mentioned big data in the past, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along here. They trying to maintain the sale, complete it, and on an ongoing basis, maintain a relationship with whoever it is that's bought the thing, and they want to repeat the process over and over again. So you change your cars every 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, they would like you to come back and buy the same car. So let me go back to the old days, the really old days. I mentioned Rolodex. Does anybody know what a Rolodex is? Nobody remembers what a Rolodex is? You want to explain what a Rolodex is?
Well, it's a set of, it's a card that's larger than a business card. You could possibly staple a business card or write the contact information on it, and it's literally, you can roll it.
Yeah, it's
alphabetically.
Yeah, it's a card. It's a manual card sorter. Basically, it's a big round bin, basically, and you can put maybe 1,000 cards in it, depending on how big it is. So you can flip through easily. but it's completely manual. And that was the value of a salesman in those days, was how big his Rolodex was. So if he had 1,000 cards in there, that was his network. That's what he maintained. That was huge value to him. So that was a key tool in those days in terms of a successful individual. The telephone was another tool, but you sat there pounding away on the phone. Hello, do you want to buy a car? Do you want to buy a car? Whatever. Direct mail, sending out contacts, and then the regular advertising. So the individual that was the salesperson, the guy that I talked about earlier in terms of selling cars, was the big talker, how you doing? I'm your best friend today, and you buy my car and go away, and I'll go away until you're ready to buy another one. So the knowledge of that whole process and the intellectual capital around the customer was really, it sat with the salesperson, not with the company. And so I'll talk a bit more about why that's important. For the company, it was a bit of a mixed blessing, because they would see additional sales coming out of the because the person knew all these people, so he'd work the network, if you will, and he would engage leverage that relationship and develop it. But it was a risk to the company, because the company didn't have the relationship, the individual had the relationship. So what happened there, companies began to recruit from competitors. In the old days in the computer industry, there was 5, 6 large computer companies, Sperry, Burroughs, IBM, and they would take their mainframe salespeople, and these were $20, $25 million computers in those days, and they would recruit their salespeople. So if someone was an expert, if his Rolodex was or her Rolodex was involved, say the banking industry, and IBM wanted to penetrate a particular bank, they would try and recruit that salesperson, bring them over to IBM, pay them big bucks. Usually it was another company recruiting an IBM person, but same idea. They would pay them big bucks to bring all their people, their network, over to their company. So this created a problem in terms of the companies, because they could lose a lot of their resources. They could lose their customers if they went with the salesperson. So CRM systems began to evolve in order to somewhat to address this problem, to say nothing of the technology. So now if you look at I don't know if you can all see that. By the way, if you have questions and stuff, feel free to ask them, and if you disagree, that's fine by me too. We can chat about it. But the whole process in the old days, the process, again, I talked about it a little bit before. You recognize the need, you identify what folks are interested in, you make sure that your product, or you try and figure out that your product will actually address those needs, and you try and fit the product into the requirement, essentially. Exactly what we do when we try and build a computer system, identify requirements and try and match the solution to the requirements. Do the purchase and then implement. So that's a fairly simple process, right? Now, as things got a little more complicated in the marketplace, salespeople began to build spreadsheets. Does anybody remember the first spreadsheet? You know what it was called? It wasn't Excel. Trust me, it wasn't Excel. Lotus 1-2-3 and VisiCalc. VisiCalc was actually the first one. Lotus came after that. Nobody knows what Lotus is anymore, right? It was an obscure IBM product. But, so the companies began to, or the individual salespeople, if they had some technical expertise, would build their own, essentially a CRM system, using a spreadsheet, collecting information about who the person was, what their contact was, when they last talked, what they talked about, when their next opportunity to get together would be, and some of the issues they might have had, send them flowers, and most important was the golf schedule. When could you play golf? The companies in that scenario began to claim ownership of that information because they recognized the vulnerability, and so again, this is sort of the background for CRM, and so I lived through this from a sales standpoint. There was resistance. The salespeople began to recognize that they were vulnerable because the company was trying to grab that information. So the internet came along in terms of becoming a tool in those days for how we can, or how they could, the companies could leverage the information. So the Palm Pilot and PCs and spreadsheets began to replace the old Rolodex that I talked about earlier. PCs became more and more pervasive, became a tool for salespeople. The early laptops are the luggables that people used to carry around. And there were tools like automated dialers. I can remember I did some work for AT&T, and would have been in the 90s, early 90s, I guess. And the big thing then was an automated dialer that would phone. It would go down a list of phone numbers, and it would dial all the numbers, and it would drop the number or drop the call if there wasn't anybody picking up, or if it went to voicemail. So as soon as it did connect and someone said hello, the call would get passed to an agent, and the agent could say, "Hello, Mr. Smith, would you like to buy a credit card today?" or whatever. But that was innovative technology in those days. Now it's, of course, going to India, and the call, you wait for 10 seconds before they connect, and they ask you if you want to clean your ducts. But in those days, it was really an innovative thing, and local, the call centers were local, so the connectivity was a lot better, or at least it seemed to be from when they call me. It's just a long, long thing. And then email, the pervasiveness of email, which again, some of you probably think email has been here since the dark ages, but it hasn't. It's only been around for relatively short term in time in terms of technology. And then websites began to get used as a way to dispense information to clients, or for clients to collect information. And then of course we had the e-commerce thing, the dot-bomb boom and all that stuff. So as it evolved, the first system for CRM really was a company called Siebel, which is named after the individual that developed the original software. I think his name was Tom Siebel or something, and that was the first sort of mainframe type product that took over that started the CRM market in the formal sense. And it was extremely successful. The company that I worked with at the time, there was a bunch of people that got recruited from that company and moved over to Siebel and were working on it. And that was really where the conflict between the salespeople and the company started to get real serious. And then the other big companies, Oracle actually bought Siebel and a bunch of other companies. So as they try and take over the world, SAP also developed their own. So it became part of the enterprise suite of products that a company like Oracle would build or buy, and IBM and SAP and those guys. The smaller companies, since those were enterprise, they needed mainframe computers to be able to run successfully. There was a whole slew of smaller companies that developed software. One of the companies that I worked for used Goldmine all the time, and same idea: collect information and sort of schedule calls and all that kind of stuff. It was PC and small network based, and then companies like Pivotal, and then the whole, I guess it was the late 90s when Salesforce came into being, or was started as a software as a service using the cloud and the network. And people at that point were wondering, why the heck would I put my information out there in Salesforce if with concerns over privacy and security of the information and sort of my corporate customer list being available on the network. But they seem to have done a pretty good job of protecting that, and certainly from the growth of Salesforce.com, they've been a pretty successful organization. So when you look at the buying process, and I'll spend a couple minutes on this, in the old days you used to do research. You'd look, does anybody remember the Yellow Pages? Sure. So the Yellow Pages used to be about 3 or 4 inches thick for Toronto. Now it's a tiny little thing if anybody uses it. So it's completely disregarded as a tool for doing research. How many of you would go to the Yellow Pages for anything?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Nobody. So you go to the internet first, right? So that's a huge change in itself. You know, in the old days, you'd also, if you're buying a car, or you go to dealers. Nowadays, you'd look at, well, I don't know how you would do it, but you'd look at online forums, you'd do the research before you even end up in a dealership, unless you've decided what kind you're going to buy, in which case you might go to different dealerships. Anyway, the process has dramatically changed. There's much less actual visiting that needs to go on. Now, you could argue, some people do, that you waste all your time on the internet trying to do the research, but it has actually changed the process, because I've known people that have actually bought cars, for example, over the internet by finding the car in the dealer's inventory, writing an email to the sales manager or whoever saying, I'm interested in this car, give me your best price, and doing that to 2 or 3 different dealerships and actually doing the transaction. So essentially the salesperson's cut out of that process. So it's really a significant change in the way that things are transacted. And you see this in other sectors as well. So this is an interesting sort of just, you remember the first picture that I showed up there with the blue process. And when you look at the whole, the spectrum of the process, and you look at the winding, that little trail that goes through there now, it shows you all the different options that companies can use in order to attract your attention, to engage you, to build in their relationship with you. They have a whole slew of tools that they didn't have in the past that they're trying to figure out how to leverage. Social media is a big one. I'm not sure of the value of social media, to be perfectly honest. I do see the value of forums in the buying.
Yeah, you're against social media.
No, I'm not convinced of the value, and I'm happy to talk about that. If someone sees a value in writing tweets about your flat tire or something, I don't know. I mean, it's maybe a generational thing, and being an old guy, it doesn't matter. Anyways, so, but the point is that the process is winding rather than purely linear as it was in the older days, and it makes everything more complicated for the consumer and also for the vendor, because they're not sure how to do it. There's all kinds of people doing consulting business around social media, which is great for them. I'm not so sure about the company, but anyway, that's another sector. So just to begin to wrap things up a little bit, CRM, it covers every single industry. Small industries, you get where it's just a pure transaction type of thing. But there still is, I get emails from some of the stores that I would buy from, and they're beginning to do things like buy online and pick up in store, which solves a huge inventory problem. Has anybody ever gone to a store to think you're going to buy a product and it's not there? Well, now you can actually check the inventory in many cases about is this particular item in the store that you want to go to, and you can make sure that the transaction you'd like to execute is there, or you can have it delivered to your house in many cases at no charge as well. Large retail, I've talked a lot about that. Banking is a huge area where they want your mortgage, they want your loan, they want your RSP, they want your TSP, they want everything that they can possibly get. So they want to know more and more about you and what your habits are. Insurance, all of that stuff the same way. One of the areas that's a little bit slower to adopt, and I think, is the whole medical arena. Doctors traditionally haven't cared so much. I think they're going to have to get into it as various types of doctors, as specialists and the like, see their world changing. But where you do see it is with dentists. Dentists will, I don't know, when the last time you went to the dentist, did they try and schedule your next appointment for you? Your next cleaning, come in 6 months or 9 months or whatever it happens to be. So that's really a form of CRM. They could do a lot better, but they've always tried to retain you as a customer, make sure you're scheduled. I'm not going to wait for you to schedule me. I'm going to schedule you proactively and get you back in here so I can continue my revenue stream with you. And of course, consulting is the same way. You pay people a bunch of money to tell you what time it is using your clock. different. Anyways, so the companies that are left in there, there's a whole range of them. I won't go into a whole bunch of detail on those ones. I think there's a little bit of open source in the market now as well, but the Dynamics, I think, and I'll put in a little plug for Ben's approach here and his history with Dynamics, but it gives you a platform on which you can build and develop a whole slew of different types of CRM tools that really are custom for your requirements in terms of the company or the organization that you're with. So some of the larger companies in particular, they say, well, we've got coverage for every possible type of circumstance, but you've got to do a lot of configuration, a huge amount of configuration in order to make it happen. So for example, with SAP, an implementation of SAP will take a couple of years typically, whereas a tool or a platform like Dynamics is generally a lot more nimble than the larger, and to say nothing of a lot cheaper. Don't know much about the open source stuff, but there is a lot of product in that marketplace as well. So where does it go? I have no idea, but I think the market is evolving. You've got two companies like Amazon that do an unbelievable job of customizing their approach. They're broadening, and it's not just books anymore. You can buy just about anything on Amazon. eBay's similar. So the idea is to leverage the data that they collect about you to precisely target and address the things that you are interested in buying. And same idea with the relationship side of it. Loblaws bought Shoppers Drug Mart. Why they did that, I think, to cross-sell. So Shoppers is expert in drugs and pharmaceuticals and that kind of thing. Loblaws does food. They integrate a little bit. I know Canadian Tire was looking at selling food, basic food products in their stores, and the whole idea of cross-selling. A key tool in all that is really the data. Everybody's talking about big data, but the analytics and grabbing as much information as they possibly can about you. If you look at a product like YouTube, when you go to YouTube, has anybody learned how to do something on YouTube? Use it as a tool for education? I'm sure you have. So one of the guys that works for me, he said, oh my, and he's not a mechanical guy at all, but his dryer broke. And he was telling me a couple of weeks ago, oh, I went to YouTube, looked at the video, and it showed me how to fix it. And he fixed it, and he said he did a good job on it. You know, it's repaired, so he saved himself several $100s. And you can find how to do just about anything on YouTube. But the interesting thing is that when you do look at it, or when you do look at a fixing process, for example, on YouTube for a bunch of different things, next time you go on, it'll give you more of the same type of stuff. So that's a form of tailored marketing. And then Google, of course, everybody knows Google. Google knows everything about you too. And then there's a whole social media stuff as well. So what I think is going to happen is that the options, the tools are going to proliferate. They're going to go all over the place and broaden out. The other key thing, I think, is services or companies like Alibaba, which is a huge success, I guess. Now, has anybody bought anything through Alibaba?
I guess so. There's a lot of Chinese people go to Taobao.
Sorry?
Most of Chinese people go to Taobao.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, actually, in the Pacific Mall, even they have a West they can do online for you because of the ordering the things.
Order here and deliver from China?
Because of the cross of that border.
Okay, so you guys can talk about that. But I use that as Alibaba as an example because I've never bought anything from them. I've looked at lots of different things, and they do an amazing job. Some of the companies over there, I don't know if they're faking it, but you know, you can look at the inside of their factories, you can look at the staff, they're all smiling around the, you know, happy, everybody's doing this stuff. And if it's true, then, and I don't know about the security of the transactions and all that kind of thing, but what it does mean is that the marketplace is becoming more and more global. And you guys would know better than I that the interaction with the Chinese marketplace and the delivery of goods manufactured in China is not only at the corporate level, but it's getting down to the individual level, so you can buy things and have them delivered, in theory anyways, to your home here. So, I think, to summarize it, nothing's changed in terms of where I started and the history that I talked about in the old days, as it were. It's still the same: identify, engage, do a transaction, capture your loyalty, and then maintain that relationship. But what's changed is the complexity and the range of choices. And so the marketplace, there's all kinds of opportunity to leverage some component of that because it's getting more and more target, but it's also more difficult because everybody's looking for the opportunity. So I think tools like the Dynamics or other CRM type tools will continue to evolve over the next few years. I mean, companies like Microsoft are certainly delving deep into it. Salesforce and eBay and Alibaba, I'm sure they're all thinking about how they can engage the world really as a marketplace as far as making things work and selling and relating to you as an individual consumer or a corporate consumer. So that's all I have to say. Are there questions?
Can you share an example of how you use, for example, I don't know if you use dynamic CRM, so how you really use this kind of particular IT tools to do some your sales or marketing management. It's just maybe a small example how that tool help you.
You mean how a tool like Dynamics would be?
Helping you to really attract the customer. Give a real example, maybe if you have. I'm not sure you really can or maybe other colleagues' example how you use it dynamic CRM to really retain the customer or even promote your product. How that works. I know now you work on in the government, so maybe the previous experience.
Well, it's a multiple. I mean, I think in the course of the discussion, there's multiple ways of engaging. So,
okay.
So you can use a tool like Dynamics to track the engagement. So, first step, as probably most of you know, would be to grab an email, track the email, and you know, there's a fine line between spam and value email.
Okay.
But if the tool allows you to truly understand what the consumer is after and the kinds of things that are of interest to them, and you can deliver a product or offers that specifically cater to that. I can give you an example, a negative example.
Okay.
I bought things on eBay. Now I'm getting customized emails from eBay that say, hey, Ilmar, we've got something perfect for you. I'm not really interested in women's boots, and I'm not that interested, I've never bought women's boots on eBay, but I get messages saying, here's what eBay has. In contrast to that, I do buy car stuff from time to time, and there's a company in the States that's got great prices. I got an and you know, I do it electronically. I've got an email from them saying, for your particular car, we have these products that the manufacturer is closing out. So I got a list of about 15 products that were heavily discounted, and I'm looking at those. I may not need those products right now, but I may buy them just to have them. So they obviously have captured all of my information, and they are giving me an offer that they think will be of value. I don't have to dig through a lot of stuff, but it's tailored to me. And so that's where a tool like Dynamics would be very, very helpful, because they're not giving me spam. I don't really care about women's boots or whatever. You know, it's that kind of thing that it's precision tailored marketing.
So basically, you were saying it's more intelligent, right? Those two.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where leveraging the data that they collect. And again, Google is phenomenal at this. I think they're not telling you how much they know about you, which is a little bit scary, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Thanks.
I have a question.
Sure.
There's so many CRM products on the market, so how do you choose it?
Go back 5 or 6 slides. I mean,
Yeah.
you mean in terms of being a developer or a company that you're trying to?
I think his question for the customer perspective, right?
Yes.
From customer perspective, which product we can
Like
choose
how
to
you choose Salesforce, now the dynamic CRM. So I believe they want to understand how you're going to choose the.
I think you
product.
have to look at a whole range of what do you need, what are you trying to achieve. So it's very similar to how you would build a computer system. Like, what are my requirements? What am I trying to achieve with my with the product? So if I'm trying to develop a customer base or a prospect base, then how can I use a product like Dynamics, like Vantiv, like Salesforce? What product would give me the best bang for the buck on that? And you have to do the research, talk to other folks, but really define what you're trying to accomplish early in the process, rather than you just have to define what you're trying to accomplish. So and then look at the products, how they actually address that need. It's not an easy process. I won't kid you on that. So you have to educate yourself or be educated. There's consultants in the room, I'm sure they can help you. But that is in effect where some value would come in, as far as a consultant, helping you walk through the process if you're own or run a company that's trying to wade their way through there. If you don't have especially when it comes to technology, if you haven't got the technical expertise, or you aren't willing to spend the time to acquire that expertise, then you can definitely go down the wrong path, because it's so complicated. Do you want to use social media? Do you think it's stupid? Does the product that you're looking at buying, does it support social media? In what way? What do you have? How much effort do you have to expend? Let's take the social media example. If you're having to do tweets every month or every day in order to satisfy the social media component, do you have a resource within your company who's willing to do that? Are you going to pay somebody to write those tweets, whether it's an outside service or somebody within your company? So those are the kinds of questions you have to ask, and then use those as a filter to look at the product that you're trying to, or you're thinking about buying, or the various products that are out there. I won't kid you, it's not an easy process, absolutely.
Yeah, just for currently, which one is most used in Toronto, for the big banks or for the big companies?
That's a hard question. I mean, Oracle has a huge presence. Oracle is outrageously expensive. I know Dynamics is being used by a lot of organizations at the departmental level. Salesforce has grown as well. I mean, and if companies, people are technically strong, they may just try and get some open source software and work their own, develop on their own and do that kind of thing. But it's not that isn't a good decision, I don't think, for a company that's focused on selling the company services, because you're essentially getting deep into technology. I'd say that and again, I don't know what, probably Ben can talk more about the presence of Dynamics in the marketplace. I know we use it a little bit in the government, but the government also has Siebel, which is, I think, a dumb decision, but whatever. I'm not answering your question very well. Yeah, you'd have to, I don't know what the dominant product would be. It would really depend on what level you're dealing with, small business versus the medium or the larger businesses. So you were going to say something?
Oh, just ask this question in another way. Saying that in your experience, have you, like, for example, you have familiar with several different CRMs. Could you give one example that when you choose a CRM for a company, that you choose one instead of the other? So any?
Why I would choose one?
This is just a real example, like, for a company with whatever business.
Well, I can go back to, it was probably 15 years ago or 12 years ago, I guess. we used Goldmine, which was one of 2 or 3 different products at the time. I think Microsoft may have bought one of the competitors, but the reason we chose Goldmine in that instance was it supported, well, we had a small call center. There was 5 or 6 agents in there, but it ran on a server, on a Windows-based server, and we could have everybody, the call center folks that were trying to schedule appointments and identify opportunities, it gave them the tools that they needed at a reasonable price to track the activity against the customer base. So it was a fairly simple product. It wasn't enterprise, it was standalone. It was completely separate from the financial systems of the company. So that was price and capability for a small call center in a, I think it was a $20 million company at the time.
Okay.
It worked very well.
Thanks.
Okay. I want to go back to your example on the car dealership. So, for example, you talked about how they email you about the new product, about the cars and the discounts. But my question is, it doesn't seem to need a tool like like the new CRM, dynamic CRM, stuff like that to achieve that, because usually the only way that someone would email you, a company would email you, is because you have previously bought stuff from there, right?
Right?
Yeah, and then they will know what car you use. You must have interaction with them first for them to know what your car is.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I think it doesn't have, like, because of this, they can be done by a man, maybe a salesperson. They already know your car. They just enter and in the database, and people just send you emails about the product related to your car. But I don't see how that is, like, that really takes up software. It can be done by man. It doesn't really need a software.
Oh, absolutely, it can be done by men. And if you go back to when I first started talking about the super salesman from the 70s,
Yeah.
he kept his Rolodex and all the information on it. He did it all manually.
Mm.
The problem is that if you're trying to go across thousands of people, one person or one sales, even a sales group can't manage that very well.
Yeah.
So I guarantee you that one guy would not be able to go through, because I haven't bought a lot of stuff from this company. I bought maybe $200 worth of car stuff from the company, so they would not, I'm not a big customer to them, but they have tracked my information. They know what kind of cars I was buying for, and they could send me the information. It's probably not worth their time to pay an individual to go through their invoices and say, oh, Ilmar bought this part for this car, so we have to generate an email. I'm pretty sure they do it in an automated fashion. I don't know if they use Dynamics or what tool they use, but they're using something that's electronic to do that.
Because from what I can tell, they might use a database and use some simple script. You can do automate emails to achieve the same goal. Why is dynamic CRM or other CRM tool really helps you in other ways that, like, is better than just a simple SQL script?
You know what? You can do that if you have but I don't think, and again, I don't know this company very well, but I don't think most businesses will have an IT department where somebody's going to write a SQL script. I mean, maybe they can get some bright student to come in and do it, absolutely, and if you can do that, more power to you. I mean, we use students all the time and they're brilliant, but you have to direct them. You have to direct them and focus them on the right way, but a small business or even a medium-sized business probably has an IT department. If they've got the resources and the energy to focus people to doing that, absolutely you can do it. There's no question. I'm not speaking, but I can tell you another example of the car industry where I was shopping for a car for a friend of mine, and I happened to give my email to a dealership, and I kept on getting stupid emails from them that weren't targeted, just were annoying, said, have you bought a car yet? Have you bought a car yet? No, I haven't, I'm not interested in you. Go away, kind of thing, and eventually that's what I said, but I'd get an email every month. That's the difference between precisely targeted and sort of blasty email, the spam type of stuff that's just annoying, you know? So you can definitely do that with SQL scripts, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
And maybe you should start a business writing SQL scripts for car dealerships, I don't know. I mean, but you have to package it up. You have to make it simple for them to use
Okay.
and sell it in that way rather than saying, okay, or offering yourself to go and write the script and away you go. I mean, yeah.
I can add something to that though. You can do anything that's similar, but nowadays even the CRM may go to more vertical. For example, you talk about this car dealership. Maybe Microsoft can borrow a lot of industry experience from the car dealership, so they inherit their system. So when you buy, you can customize to your business. But
Yeah.
if you yourself, you probably just know that's a bit of information, very narrowly.
Or if you're building it, you're gonna build it for that particular business,
Correct.
which may not apply as well. It's a fine balance. I
Yeah.
mean, SAP or the Oracles of the world would say, oh, we can do any kind of business, and we're the best at doing it. The problem is that it's so complicated to customize it, it takes months or years in order to make it work in the way that you want it to work, and you're paying a ton of money, both for the software and for the service, to be able to customize it. So
Yeah.
if you take somebody and write SQL scripts, you're writing it for that individual company, whereas a platform would give you a little more flexibility as far as customizing it goes.
Yeah, and also the CRM, I believe that's why the people probably some people need to learn how to use the tools. I mean,
Yeah.
from the IT perspective, you have to help the sales guy to configure the tools.
Oh, yeah,
To
sales guys are
target how to
useless,
use
they're
it,
dumb.
right? You know that you have CRM, probably you don't know how to really configure it.
Yeah,
You just
absolutely.
tell the IT guy or the administrator how to configure that, then those guys can use maybe the full potential from
Yeah,
that tools
yeah.
to sell the product.
Well, you certainly, if you're gonna build a SQL script,
Yeah.
you better put a nice front end on it, or else
Correct.
the sales guy's not gonna use it, I guarantee you that.
Yeah, another question I have is about the capture. You say it has to go from capture, right? And I think a lot of problem that why people doesn't send tailored message is because they don't do the capture very well. They only know a car type, but they don't know what you need.
Yep.
Maybe that's why they spam you with a lot of junk mails, which people hate.
Yep.
And how does like dynamic CRM resolve, like not dynamic CRM but any CRM tools, that how do they generally solve this problem? It seems like a pretty complicated.
Well, it's again collecting the information and identifying, you know, in the case of the Rock Auto, the auto parts company, they know what I bought. And so they're making an assumption that I'm still interested in. When I flip cars in 2 or 3 years and they send me an email for my old car, that's probably of less interest. But at least they have my information and they've collected the data, and that's where the precision comes in. And that's, Amazon does a marvelous job of that as well. You look at, you know, books on CRM, for example, and they'll give you 5 or 6 suggestions on what other people have looked at who've done the same thing. That's fairly complicated development. That's and management of big data in that circumstance, and that's where software. You're not going to do that with your SQL script, I don't think. At least not in the short term.
So, can you please raise an example of how does a dynamic CRM work effectively in a B2B business?
B2B business?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Alibaba is good example, I mean, B2B.
Sorry?
Alibaba is a good example.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, most of the Alibaba consumers would be resellers here. You wouldn't buy 100, I don't know, solar panels from Alibaba and use them for your own house. You'd probably be running a business. So once that, once the vendor in China had you as a customer, then Alibaba would be the vehicle by which you transact business, and they would presumably collect a lot of information about your company, the kinds of the target market that you're after, the the level of product that you're after, whether they're highly sophisticated, custom engineered type of things, or run-of-the-mill battery charger type level products. And I think a friend of mine at the cottage uses he's got a manufacturing company, and he builds brushes, aluminum brushes. So he does custom fabrication with welding, and he maintains all of his drawings on a separate system, but he tailors his CRM system to the type of company. So they'll make brushes, for example, for farms that grow strawberries and raspberries. So they're tools that will take the strawberries and raspberries off the vines, the branches, and do that in an efficient manner. So what he does is between the CAD system that's used to design the products, he'll extract that information and get feedback in his CRM system to get feedback from the customer, put feedback and maintain that in the CRM system. So if he has to make an adjustment to the product to customize it, like they're complaining about the nylon wearing out too quickly or something like that, that's noted in the CRM system, and they'll make adjustments or deal with that particular problem and track it. And so when they phone in 6 months, when they think the product needs to be replaced, they'll say, "Oh, I understand you had this issue with the brushes. You had some concerns about that. Have they been addressed?" That kind of thing. And which is hard to do. It's hard to do on a Rolodex. It's certainly impossible to do on paper and files. I mean, I shouldn't say impossible, but it's more difficult to do. Whereas if you have the system, you put the notes in, and you say, you've addressed the concern in your interaction with the customer. So next time you go to them to renew the order or get some feedback, you've got all that data right there, and you can deal with the concern or the issue that they might have had at the time. Thanks.
From your seminar, it seems like the CRM is a tool. It's a tool.
Yes.
But my question is, in the job market, what kind of people a company like better, the IT guy or the salesperson who can use CRM?
What kind of person?
The company like.
You mean what in terms of value to the company?
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's a hard question, isn't it? I mean, any company.
The salesperson is more important.
Well, I'd say that the salesperson is a little less important than they used to be, but the sales function is still there. Whether it needs to be sitting with an individual or not is more of a question. You remember the path that the up and down path, and the no longer a straight linear kind of thing, which was easy to navigate for a salesperson. I think probably in the future, IT is going to be more important if the company is able to. It depends on the kind of company too, because there's a lot of companies that still require a back and forth to help them define the requirements. So, a salesperson or a consultative type person that can help a company articulate exactly what they need and then tailor something to meet that need. So that's where a product, that's configurable, that can be customized, like Dynamics, is a good tool that probably can replace some of the sales function, even though, again, depending on the product, you don't need the level of sophistication in the salesperson anymore. Like, selling cars is pretty much a transactional thing these days. Most people will do the research, decide what kind of car they want, maybe go out and drive 2 models, narrow it down that way, and then negotiate. So I'd say it diminishes the sales function, it diminishes the individual sales function in terms of the individual that interacts with the company, but it doesn't necessarily, the function can be replaced, so there's more tools, that you would use as a company to engage the customers.
Right. That's why actually right now, online shopping is so popular, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to go to a store individually.
Yeah, I mean, you can, in a lot of cases, you get stuff delivered right to your house. I mean,
That's
some
right.
of my kids won't go to the store, they buy everything online and have it sent. Yep.
If you'll allow to continue the conversation, I appreciated your comment about the car salesman. If you were a realtor, for example, I'd like to hear your comments as to how
That's different, yeah.
a realtor would use the CRM and how do you personally see that transpire?
Well, I think that's an industry that, there's a lot of things you could talk about in terms of real estate. I think a lot of the same ideas apply in terms of the research. The difference with real estate is I think there's for the agents who belong to an organization like the Toronto Real Estate Board, they have an inside, they have access to information that other people don't have access to. And I think that's one of the struggles for the industry. If you go to realtor.ca, you see a lot of the listings, but a lot of them are not brand new. So the agents will get access to the, you list your house today and the agents can see it tonight or tomorrow. The public won't see it for a few days or possibly weeks. I'm not sure how it works now. I know we did some work at the Toronto Real Estate Board a few years ago, and there is a whole internal component. I know the industry or the marketplace is saying, well, what's the value of the agents in that scenario? I think there still is value as far as helping to negotiate the sale. If it's worth, I'm not sure it's worth 5%, but that's open to negotiation, I guess, and to some extent now it is with agents. I think that industry is going to change. I would say the same thing for the investment industry, because that's going to changing as well. Because why do you need an investment advisor? There's all kinds of research tools available out there in the market, or even with your own bank. If you have a trading account, you can get all kinds of analytics on the stocks that you might be interested in. So, the value of the investment advisor is probably open to a little bit of question. It's going to evolve, and I'd say the same thing about real estate as well. But I'd still argue that there is some value as far as negotiating with a buyer, especially if it's not even in the instance of a private sale, there's all kinds of, you're buying a $1 million house or something, you want to know that it's got some decent integrity to it and it's not going to fall apart and it doesn't have formaldehyde in the walls and stuff like that.
Does our government use our CRM to manage how the welfare be distributed? Apparently, everybody in the government, like in society, is a customer of government.
The government's wrestling with that. I mean, I believe the CRM is used for case management. The example would be social assistance, where somebody applies. It would go into a CRM system, which is called a case management system. So all the interaction with the individual would be tracked in that case management system, and they've spent a ton of money on them. I'm not sure it's been necessary. There's also another example which is similar in terms of correspondence. So if you're corresponding with the Premier, you go to the Premier's website and you write an email to her, then I know it goes to it's not really a CRM system, but it does, that correspondence gets tracked and it has to be the Premier, in this case, the Premier's writers have to respond within a certain amount of time. So that's a form of CRM. They have service level agreements that the writers have to be able to meet. So, yeah, it's a similar idea. Service Ontario, which would be the front end of all the, you know, where you go to the offices, you go to do your driver's license and that kind of thing. I think they're not using a CRM system, and that's mainly because most of the systems, like the driver's systems, are 20 or 30-year-old mainframe-based systems written in COBOL. And if you want a job, then learn COBOL and go work in the government, because there's all kinds of consultants there. But that's an editorial comment. Don't take that off the table.
About 2 months ago, there was a news pop up. The Toronto Star says the union worker from Service Ontario will be protesting, or maybe they try to go strike because they found out the workfare distribution system has problem. There's a calculated amount, like wrong or something, incorrect something. Just remember, probably we are using some sort of CRM and maybe misconfigured.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about that system. I'm not sure if, I thought that was a custom developed thing, but it's a different area. I'm not that familiar with it, so I can't really say much about it.
Okay, I actually have used SAP during my work.
Yep.
I know some of the customization they do, they write pretty much functions, SQLs, some kind of SQLs and stuff like that to configure stuff and basically develop new features. I assume it would be similar in a CRM system as well. However, if we choose to learn dynamic CRM, because from what my experience is, this SAP is really complicated. It consists of millions of functions, and the only way to learn them is actually doing them. And because we are only learning them, we are not going to know a lot of them, I guess. So it becomes really hard to find, I guess, the first job. What advice do you have if we decide to, let's say, to learn dynamic CRM, and how do we focus on finding our first job?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think your internships are a good way of doing it if you're relatively new to a particular space. I mean, and I think private sector companies do them as well. I know the government has internships, and I think probably some of the larger companies do as well. And that's often a way of getting in. It's a relatively easy way. I'm not sure how the structure is here, but if there are co-op opportunities where you can get a placement, and whether it's paid or not through a school, there's some value in that. It basically, an employer has to have a chance to assess you in a low-risk manner. So internships and co-ops are a great way of doing that. That would probably be the easiest thing. The other one would be through consulting. If you've got, for example, if you've got SAP expertise, I suspect there's all kinds of, again, I'm not that familiar with SAP, but there's probably...
Casual user.
Casual user, okay. So approach the companies. Again, Microsoft probably isn't hiring a whole lot, but you know, companies that use the products, again, or partners. Let's take the Microsoft example. Microsoft has tons of partners, so approaching the partners and circulating your resume, or even going and talking to them, which they probably would do, not in terms of looking for a job, but maybe understanding the marketplace and what kind of skills you need to develop to be an effective employee for them. That would be another thing you could do. Microsoft especially, or Microsoft partners, would be good in that regard, I think. Well, thank you, appreciate it.